Welcome to We Chat Divorce. Catherine and I welcome attorney Heather Quick, the founder and CEO of the only divorce and family law firm for women in Northeast Florida. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much, ladies, for having me today. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we are too. So, our episode today is all about protecting your wealth when divorcing. In this episode, we'll discuss the importance of separating from your emotions, getting prepared, developing strategies so that you can navigate your divorce with confidence and knowledge. But first, let's meet Heather. Heather's vision for Florida Women's Law Group began with a passion for changing the way women in Florida undergo divorce. By offering family and marital law services specifically for women, we know there's a couple law firms out there for men, which is great. And, I don't think I've heard of other law firms specifically for women. So this is really great. But Florida's Women Law Group works in a consistent and reliable way to advocate for women. The firm educates and empowers women on their rights and the law so that they can find the strength to endure the process and end up better financially and emotionally. That's fantastic.
Well, that is certainly our goal for all of our clients. Yes.
Good. So that parlays so well with my first question. And I always like to start out our podcast with our guests sharing their story. So, Heather, what brought you to, this great work that you do?
Oh, thank you for asking. And it really was or has been a journey. And I believe that, particularly with family law for lawyers, it's one of those that maybe it chooses you and you don't see it at first. And so, as a young attorney, I was a prosecutor, really enjoyed the litigation, the courtroom, and that side of the law, the criminal law. No idea my life's work would end up being in family law. But as I transitioned out of that and eventually decided to open my own practice, what I found was I didn't really like keeping people out of jail, right? That was inconsistent with the way I'm wired. And so that was not, which most criminal attorneys, they leave the state attorney's office and then become defense attorneys. But that was really not for me. But what seemed to really appeal to me and the cases I attracted were family law. And I had learned that while working with my uncle, who's a lawyer. And the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it. And mostly because I have a lot of experience with it personally. Not myself. I've been married at 23 years this year, but both of my parents have been married and divorced multiple times. They divorced one another and then went on to marry and divorce other individuals. And so I had basically a front row seat into that entire process. And I could very much relate to the clients. And the more I grew in that practice, the more I recognized patterns in women, patterns that I saw in my mother, as far as, I've laid out the law, we can really pretty much figure out where they're going to end up, but they really gave up early. They're really ready to quit. It was too much. And they would end up sacrificing their own financial future just because they felt that maybe the litigation, the adversarialness of it was too much. And I saw that there was an opportunity for me to really help them and make a difference if we could provide that strength for them and carry them through to the end, because it's like that, you're closer than you think. And usually that's when you really want to quit, but you're almost there, right? You're almost at the top of the mountain. You're almost at the finish line. So that is what began that restructuring of the firm to really focus on women, because they do go through divorce differently and they do look at it more holistically. It affects them in a very different way. It's not as transactional for women as it is for most men. And I thought we can really make a difference. And so that is when we transitioned and created a firm that was just for women.
For women by women. I love that. I saw that. Let's just make our podcast all about that, because
Okay.
as you're talking, this is the situation so many women are in. And even the ones who are strong, sometimes they're almost to the top and they just over it. They're willing
Mhm.
to give in because they don't have someone encouraging them to keep going. Most of the attorneys, quite frankly, that I have come across, they pick that female to settle. They're saying, I've got the client who's going to settle. And it's sad
Mhm.
to see because they just wear them down and wear them out. And what I'm all about somebody settling if they're financially clear and it's in their best interest. So that I don't think any of us are saying that. It's just that, so many compromise themselves and regret it. I mean, I think the three of
Mhm.
us can bring up many instances when some woman came up to us and said, I wish I knew you then, you know, because they just
Yes.
give up so much. So I want to encourage your mission statement there because I think it's really profound and it is so much needed. Because we just, we hand off our portrait to their, they take it to their attorneys. And we always want them to have an attorney who's going to help them advocate for themselves and know when to fold them and know when to hold them, right? Is that the a saying out there,
Exactly.
right? So
That's it.
so I just, want to reiterate, I fully support that mission. And I think it's enlightening to hear. And it's really inspirational to hear that you're out there actually working with that in your mindset and your whole team in that mindset.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree. And Heather, you said that women process by and large, right? Information and especially divorce in a very different way than the general male population, although we all know there's crossover there. Um, so just thinking about that, it seems that a lot of women tend to approach life as fixing things, right? We're moms. What do you need? What can I do for you?
mhm.
And then a lot of the males, while they can be fixers, like a lot of times they'll come to the table and they'll say, all right, I'm going to take care of you because I always have. And that emotion stays in place until they become uncomfortable, right? It's their definition of what taking care of you means. And so
Mhm.
when you're dealing with women in that space, what are some of the initial strategies from a legal perspective that they can start to implement to start gaining um, the courage to be to take on the responsibility, I guess, of knowing what they have and making decisions for themselves, irrespective of what's going on the other side. How do you help them there?
Um, well, right. So the first thing is understanding, hey, what is the financial landscape of our marriage, our divorce? What's available to me? So that
Mhm.
is the first step. And so we want to look at that. And then it's really important to understand. I usually give, parameters based on experience, the facts of the case, as far as, okay, well, one, if it's all marital property, it's going to be divided. So I share with clients that, okay, I know he says, oh, I'm going to take care of you, and you think he's being so generous, but let's be clear, that pension, that 401k, that's half yours. He is not doing anything special. And let's just understand that, because that's where I think women can get caught up always being so nice. It's like, no, this is the law. He's smart and he's making you think he's being generous. But it is a very, like, it's not even worth arguing about if it's along, the marriage has, encompassed the entire part of employment, right? On a pension, on a retirement thing. Now, as we get to spousal support, that's where many women, I feel like, one, they don't understand and they're not sure, and then they feel as though maybe they're being greedy. I can't ask for too much, and that's again where it's like, well, let's explain the law. So this is the law, and this is how it's going to apply in your case. Because, as which I know you two know that, because you don't have to be a lawyer to know it's different. It's your facts. but that's what we as lawyers do. We apply the law to your facts, explain to you this may be the range of spousal support, and this might be the duration based on the law and your facts. So now they can say, oh, he's actually not being generous at all because I'm entitled to XYZ. And now I understand that. And I think that's really important. And it helps, I think, women gain some of that confidence if, particularly if they have not been the breadwinner or an equal earner, there is what I've seen is automatically a feeling of, well, it's his money and he's told her he's worked, and what am I going to be entitled to? So that's really the first step, is evaluating all those financials and helping them understand this is where you're going to fit as far as a range, because I think that's very helpful. Best day in court, worst day in court, like where we are, these are some variables so they can begin to start having realistic expectations of where we may ultimately end up, whether through mediation, which is required in the state of Florida, or ultimately litigating. Because that's
Yeah,
what's the most important,
yeah.
knowing that range.
So when we do that work with our clients to get them prepared to come see you, um, let's just give you a little scenario if you're listening to exactly what Heather is saying. And this is so important. So, I often will hear from a female saying, oh my gosh, I don't know how my husband will pay that range of support because I see the check that comes in. Look, it's deposited into this account and it's only X amount of dollars. How is he going to give me that much? And I say, well, wait a minute. You're not clear on what is being deducted from his paycheck. That check is a net check amount. And
Mhm.
then you could go back and look in their pay statements and see that they're over contributing sometimes to something. They're not taking
Mhm.
the right exemption. So more is being taken out that should be, because, that's a good tax planning tactic sometimes for some people. And there's some voluntary deductions that are happening that have to be added back. And then they get the eye awakening saying, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that. And I said,
Mhm.
yes, that's what your attorney is going to use for a support calculation. So now their guilt goes away a little bit. Some of them get a little angry. Whoa, my gosh, she's been taking that much out and I'm living off of nothing right now. So again, if you're listening, that's a place to get that clarity so you don't feel guilty of, oh my gosh, how is my spouse going to do that? Because this is what I
Mhm.
see, what I was told.
And that's
So
a
I
really
have,
good point. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. To
go
help
ahead.
them. And then, yeah, also oftentimes, and this is, and this can be in even a two income household, but regardless, oftentimes it's hopefully what they will learn, like when they are with you, is wow, these are the bills and this is the bottom line of what's coming in. There's going to have to be changes. And that, again, it's just understanding, realizing that there are going to probably have to be changes. You may not be able to afford the house where you're both living now, for one of you to live in and another somewhere else. And sometimes that's just the reality.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think another concept that people have trouble understanding um, is when, and we'll talk obviously specifically about Florida today, but when does property become separate in Florida? You know, they need to know that, right? That's one of the
Mm.
considerations. And when does the court look at income for either spouse? Is it today? Is it the, date it became separate property? I get that question a lot. And then I get a third question as to, well, my spouse says that they're going to get fired, or now the business isn't doing well,
Mhm.
or now his stock options are different. Like all of a sudden, things are changing and they don't have a frame of reference as to why, but we get it fairly routinely that, oh, my spouse is getting fired, or he's looking or she's looking for a new job, or whatever the case may be. And those three, can you just talk about those three questions? Because we get those a lot here.
Absolutely. So when we're looking, and some states are community property and some states are separate property. Florida is a separate property. And so I can speak on that. which the majority of states are separate property. So you go into a marriage, and an easy example is you each own a house. And as long as your name is the only name on that house, that is your house. You may come into a marriage with a 401k. Now, then, once married, if you sell those houses, combine them, you're going to lose any separate property. But if you keep yours and don't put his name on the title and use it as rental property, say, that is separate property, but it will have a marital component. And so this answer is not always easy. And just like with a 401k, a pension, in the military, we have a lot of military. Part of that retirement is marital. And it's separate property, but it has marital component. That is an easy formula based on the length of the marriage and the length of the service employment. And so we do those calculations. Now, for your listeners, I want them to know if they get married and move into their husband's house and he never puts them on the title, you can never force the sale of that house because it is non-marital property and the court can't do that here in Florida. And you have a misconception that that's our home. And as far as the division, and there's a lot of things that go into that, but that's something that I find that when women are the sole title holder, if they ever refinance, if they ever do anything, the title companies tell them all the time they have to put their husband on the deed, and they don't do that to men. So that's just an
I
area where
went through that myself.
I think women need to know that you don't have to
They
put him
do.
on the deed. You do not have
Yeah.
to. And they'll tell you to do that. And they don't tell
I
men that.
refused.
Good for
I
you.
refused, and I thought they may walk away from the table, but I was like, "There's
Mhm.
no way." Yeah.
Right. And so that's one that we were talking about. And then now when
Yeah.
there's those changes in jobs
Well,
and
wait,
or
can you go back? So can you talk about the end of the marriage? When does it become separate? Is it date of filing, date of separation? Can you talk about those
okay, yes.
things
So
there?
when
Yeah.
in Florida, and that's where it's one of those,
Yeah.
well, it depends, but there is a general rule that date of filing. Data filing, so like looking at that 401k and even the income. And that can be tricky sometimes because then they start putting more into their 401k like right after they file. And again, as to Catherine's point earlier, just to lower that net paycheck. Um, so we'll look at the data filing, but the law in Florida allows for you to make an argument for different dates, whether it's the date of filing, the date of separation, or the date of the trial. And often, because the court does have that discretion, they can pick different assets for different dates of valuation um, if wanted. And a lot of times that's where I think clients are a little confused when during mediations, like we have the list of assets, but we look at the date of filing, if there was an earlier date of separation, the date of filing, and then the date where you are right now. And so, and that can be very fact specific. And obviously, each side is going to argue for something that will be in their client's best interest. So that's really how we look at property as far as valuation and what date.
That's also a good reason why you should not prematurely be negotiating with your spouse. So, a spouse who may
Correct.
have been advised of what his attorney is telling him is the best for him or her, be careful about agreeing to something because emotionally it's fueling you. You feel better because emotionally it sounds like a good thing. You have to double check that and make sure financially it's just as smart because it won't feel good a couple of years down the road.
Correct. And so let's talk about, oh, he's about to get fired. Um, you know, if I've heard that once, I've heard it right 100 times, and same with the courts. The favorite one being, well, my bonus is not guaranteed, right? I've received it every year for the past 10 years, but it's no guarantee. It is what it is. So we look at the past 3 years. And, if that's why I believe divorce planning, if you are in that situation, is imperative because you really want to do that without alerting your spouse to get a little bit of an advantage on understanding that financial landscape and what you're looking at. and also what has been going on the past 3 years. That's the general look back on earnings. And if he was not fired, but just quit voluntarily and said, "Oh, I'll quit before I pay you alimony or whatever," the court will impute income that is, reasonable. But it's difficult. I'll tell you, especially back in '09, '08, when there were, the real estate market was upside down. There were times where it's like a lot of folks kind of understood the landscape and they're like, I think I need to wait. Or their husband just got laid off, but he was looking for a job. It's like, well, let's not fire. I mean, if you file right now, he's not going to be that motivated to look for a job. So maybe you want to wait it out, because even if the court does finalize the divorce, they may have to just award a nominal alimony and wait. Then that just means you have to go back to court to have that reevaluated once he has a new job. So, that's why, again, your facts are so important to really understand how that affects you legally, in a divorce.
Yeah, another great example of that is you could be thinking that you want a divorce for a couple of years, especially the great divorces, right? There is no
Yes.
reason. It's just that emotionally you're out, right? So now
Hmm.
you finally get the nerve up to do it, but you pick the date right before equity compensation is awarded or granted, right? So now you've just picked a separation date, or your spouse picks a date right around or right before an equity award is being granted. So, part of our process is when we're getting people prepared, like you mentioned, get prepared first. Um, we can determine that before you actually decide to tell your spouse you want to get a divorce.
Right. Because then, really, and I think, to that point, there may be arguments, right? That was really earned all up until the date of filing. But again, it's another hurdle, another argument that will potentially, just take a little longer and does create more litigation. And most likely it will be worth it on your part to argue for that. But right, understanding before you do it is always so much better, rather than reactively filing for divorce without doing the preparation, which of course for some folks is just really where they are. But when you've been thinking about it and like you're going to do it, you just don't know when, well, get prepared, so that can, maybe if you're on the fence, it helps you at least make that decision.
I
Yeah.
think people can't, they don't understand that, your hands are tied. I mean, if they're not ready to file and they don't know what they want or what they need, and they don't have that work done, you can't really use your legal expertise for them. So we love when they come, because we're not attorneys. We don't give legal advice, right? But we can certainly get them financially prepared. We just even start with the income and expenses, but gathering their documents and getting through their assets and debts with them so that they can go to you and really get your insight on what's best for them. And is this the
Mhm.
right timing? It makes it just streamlines the process, and it makes you be put in a position where you, as the person going through this, is really utilizing your expertise to talk about the timing and talk about the impact and talk about what's next and what it will look like.
Hmm.
So
And it
true.
does, and it helps clarify the financials, because there's so many emotions. But if you have a handle on what there is, and how much it costs to run your life, which can be eye opening for anybody who like does a audit of the credit card statement or the bank statements, and then it's like, my goodness, a lot of money flowing out. It's so helpful, because then you at least have information. So when those emotions come up and it feels as though, well, he's not going to support us, it's like, well, this is the money that's available. And at least helping with that understanding, because in my experience, most of the women really don't have a full understanding of everything that's going in. And even when they are working, they just might not fully understand what even his finances, what he's bringing to the table, what he has available.
So true. So let's talk a little bit about financial disclosures, because I think, and it will help our audience to hear this from you. And again, this is very specific to Florida, but my experience is once the divorce is filed, A financial disclosure is due along with a whole bank of documents. And our clients tend to be super responsive to that. I know there's a court deadline, but they stay on the straight and narrow with the court deadline. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, opposing counsel is 6, 8 months later getting their stuff back. So, can you just talk about the financial disclosure process? Because, we do try to encourage our clients to, unless, an attorney advises otherwise, to kind of stall on that filing until you get all this together, because once you file, it's due. And then if you're not ready, then you're just kind of throwing stuff at your attorney and they're, you kind of, it seems chaotic to me.
Yes. So, right. And there's absolutely the more that you have ready on the financial disclosures, the better,
Mhm.
because the emotions are what get in the way and prevent you many times subconsciously from really doing what we've asked you to do. And yes, there are deadlines for disclosures, vary by state to state, but usually it's like 30 days and you send a request and somebody gets 30 days. And so that's why when folks say, well, how long, why does it take so long? Well, those 30-day periods, just before you know it, 6 months has gone by, and not everyone is responsive and on the ball. And so you really should ask your attorney what happens if they don't turn it in. And most of the time, we will say, well, there are certain rules we have to follow, which means we have to be courteous and and say you're tell somebody they're late. Sounds so stupid when you say it out loud. I've got to tell you you're late, and then say, would you please give that to me? In the next 2 or 3 days, which is still late. And then they get an opportunity to respond, and then you have to do that prior to filing a motion with the court. But very often, I would say attorneys, firms are either have more clients than they can handle, less staff than they can handle, and they just don't make it a priority. And they're not particularly men. Like the men just drag their feet, whatever, because, they're like, well, I don't want to do this. And the attorneys don't really hound them. So you absolutely need to understand that many times, if we want this, we need to go to court to compel that disclosure. But there are a lot of other ways that sometimes can be faster. We can issue subpoenas. All right, so you have to pay for a subpoena, but now we'll get records direct from credit card company or bank. And often a deposition is a really good tool just to get the husband to sit down and ask him all these questions and ask them about their financial statement, which we call a financial affidavit. And so I find that will shortcut months of waiting and back and forth very often. But I think sometimes clients hear, well, oh, that costs money. And it's like, well, it all costs money, but it's like relative to what?
Mhm.
6 more months of your life being in limbo without a date? And how about we do it this way that will get us information faster and also save you time in the long run? So that's a conversation I think that, for people listening, and women listening, I think that's important information for you to know and for you to ask if you're interviewing an attorney. Well, what if they're not cooperative? Even though, understanding the rules, because our clients say it all the time. Oh my God, we spent so much time on this. You made sure every bit of this was accurate, and theirs is full of lies and inaccurate and sloppy. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
that you need to know we take this very seriously. And as the individual, if you are asking for money, you need to be real clear on your needs and the documents that you're responsible for. And we can't control that side, but there are remedies within the court. Some judges are better than others. Some, unfortunately just don't like making decisions. I'm not quite sure why they wanted to become a judge, but they do, and they
Mhm.
don't make decisions. And that's, you know, it's good to understand, hey, there are a lot of variables very often, but you can control what you're supposed to do. So that's what you need to do, and allow your attorney and make sure they're going to pursue that information.
Yeah. I love that you said that opposing counsel often, or spouse via opposing counsel, the information comes back that's interpreted as lies. And I often see that almost as a distraction to where, you know, the focus should really be on, which is the financials, you know, even though that may not be accurate, does it really impact your ability to make a good financial decision? And so we work with our clients in that space as well because they they do get emotionally charged. The spouses know how to, you know, emotionally charge each other, but, it's to our clients' detriment sometime to get distracted by that because then they could miss something really big that's right in front of them that they don't see.
That's such a good point. And at the end of the day, they're like, oh, well, they lied. Well, that's okay. We will get to what really matters is what money is coming in, which can be proven. Gets tricky when they own their own business. Then that's going
Mhm.
to take a little bit more of investigating and sometimes an expert. But for the majority of folks, if they're employed, like we can see the money coming in. And in fact, if we see it going out, we know it's coming in. It's just a matter of where. And you're right, they get very emotionally charged that he's saying they spend $2,000 a month eating out. Why isn't he buying groceries? It's like at the end of the day, that is an insignificant thing to focus and harp on so much. And at the end, and also in a hearing, I think it's helpful for clients to know that your lawyer knows the information that needs to be elicited to most benefit you and or attack the credibility of your spouse. So it's important just to have that trust and faith. A lot of times they want us to ask about things that it's like we don't have enough time, and it's not gonna be relevant, and the court may get very upset knowing that a lawyer's asking something that's just irrelevant and that is going to waste time. And so that's, again, that's part of the education. It's not Law and Order or, whatever we have on TV. It's never
Yeah.
like that. Or it used to be Matlock, there's no gotcha moments. Like that just doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
that's a big part of it, and you don't get to just like sit there and have a narrative to the judge to tell, like, it's just not going to happen. And that's something that clients have to understand as well and accept.
I
Yeah.
had that awakening in a judge in the courtroom. I kept addressing the judge, and the judge kept saying, and he was so nice. He's like, "Ma'am, you have to talk to your attorney. Let your attorney." And then I looked at my ex, and I was like, that's not true, ma'am. You cannot
I
talk to
know you can't
your.
do that.
You have
Yep.
to use your attorney to talk to.
And that's good. Patient. And then
Amazing.
you clearly learn and didn't do it. But people get, and that judge will get onto you, and that's not a good feeling. I mean,
Mhm.
this is the person that is going to be deciding these issues. Do not tick them off. It is going to affect your credibility, the things that, they have. But yeah, you can't just mouth off and tell the judge what you want. Or yeah, right. Looking at your
I was
husband.
being
Oh my
nice.
God.
I was like, "Judge, would you like to look at my phone at the text ma'am, no, I don't wanna look." I mean, he awarded in
I
my
know.
favor at the end of the day, but I'm such a logical thinker.
Oh
I
my
was like,
God.
I was
"Why
like,
do I
just look
need
at this. It'll make so much
just
sense,
look,
right?
why are we
I
saying this? Just
know. But
just
that's not the
look
way the
down
rules
there."
of evidence work. And it's just not the way it works. And
Yeah.
and that's a great example. That's why you gotta have a lawyer. You can't just go into court and tell him everything that you want. Show him your phone. This is what's happening, and then he's going to make a decision. It just doesn't work that way. And so you really have to have somebody who understands the rules. And I think for especially women, anybody going through this, ask your attorney why. I don't think there's anything, not when you're in the courtroom, but ahead of time when they're preparing you and you're asking issues. The best thing you can do is continue to ask questions so that you do understand, because we've done this thousands of times. We might forget to tell you the why on every single thing. And so make it count too, right? You don't want to spend 4 hours in your attorney's office understanding why. Like, read what they send you, get the information that they've tried to help you educate yourself so that you can begin to understand the why, which I think can help a little bit when you are in such a foreign situation when you're in court.
Yeah. So true. So much good information. Thank you so much, Heather. How can our listeners find you and learn more about your law group?
Yes, they can find us at floridawomensLawGroup.com. And on our website, we do have many, many resources, lots of information. And from the website, they can schedule a call with a client coordinator. They can also watch just a myriad of information and resources on various topics. And they also can, find us on Facebook, all the social media at it's the number 4 Women Law. And we have a Facebook group for women that are, thinking about divorce, going through divorce, or been through a divorce. And that is called Women Winning Divorce. And we, are just trying to create a community where women can support and uplift one another regarding this process.
That's great. And what counties do you cover? Does your firm
So
cover?
we are in Northeast Florida. So that is Duval, Nassau, Clay, St. John's, and Flagler counties are the
Okay,
main ones that we cover.
excellent. All right. Well, this concludes our discussion on protecting your wealth when divorcing. Thank you, Heather, so much for a fantastic conversation.
Oh, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Catherine. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Likewise.